Welcome to the DFS Jam. I'm Peter Overzet, here for the first time in a long time on the Fantasy Life YouTube channel. This is a new show that I'm going to be streaming every single Thursday afternoon. And like the title suggests, it's a jam. We might be doing some underdog drafts. We could talk some salary cap lineups on DraftKings, get my thoughts on the slate. My plan each week is on Thursdays to write my DFS column, which is actually already up now on Fantasy Life. So that gets me the baseline for my weekly research. I've had a chance to go through projections. I got to set my ranks for the Underdog Battle Royale streets. And this is essentially like my first look for drafting teams. As of right now, I have not drafted any teams. So you guys are going to get to kind of hear me talk through my initial thoughts. You know, I do a Battle Royale draft typically at the end of the portfolio review on Mondays on my stream. And that's like my true first look. But then I kind of shut my brain off as far as thinking about the next week in DFS until Thursday morning. That's when I look at projections, start my research. And so, yeah, I'm excited about this show. And it looks like we have a few of you guys watching here. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the Fantasy Life YouTube channel. If you guys have any questions throughout the show, I will definitely be happy to field those. Let me make sure that this is posting correctly on the Fantasy Life YouTube channel here. This is the first time we are doing it, so just want to make sure all the tech stuff is working properly. I'm using my typical StreamYard setup here, but obviously broadcasting to the Fantasy Life YouTube channel. I have some weird light thing right here that I'm trying to figure out what is going on there. I'll try to get that figured out, some kind of reflection with my camera. But other than that, I think we're good. Nathan says it looks good. What's up, Fatty McFats? We got A-Rod here. Excited to jam with you guys. What is up, Sean? All right. Let's as this show evolves, you know, I have some ideas for it. Obviously, we'll bring some guests on from the Fantasy Life universe to draft some teams with me. I also think it'd be fun to spin a wheel and kind of do some, I don't know, maybe quirky builds or push outside my comfort zone with BR stuff. But for this first show, and as I'm just getting my bearings on week 2, I think we will just draft a couple of BR teams here, get in the groove a bit, and then we can kind of figure it out as we go. Let me get my screen share all set. Shout out to my producer, Matt Swing, for getting us some background, some graphics here. And let me actually share my window so I can pull up some notes and projections as well. I believe the Fantasy Life DFS projections should be out now as well. But we're going to go over here and check on this. As I mentioned, my week 2 DFS column for Fantasy Life is up on the site. I'll drop this in the chat if you guys want to bookmark and check that out later. The topics I kind of covered this week, how to approach this week from a macro perspective. So this idea of we have all of this data from week 1, and it's a small sample size. What are the things that we want to react to? And what are the things that we kind of want to ignore as small sample size noise? And I feel like the Dolphins are essentially the perfect use case for this because they looked so bad in week 1. And yet here they go. They're at home versus New England Patriots secondary that looks awful without Christian Gonzalez. They just gave up 362 passing yards to Geno Smith. It's been hard for the Patriots historically going down to Miami early in the year. The humidity, the sun there has given them fits. So this looks like a spot where I kind of want to ignore some of the noise on the Dolphins, and I'll be firing up some Tua stacks, and that could look very, very silly come Monday morning. But that's one where I am kind of willing to ignore a little bit of what happened in week 1. And then like the flip side of that coin that I highlight here would be somebody like Keon Coleman, where I think the field's gut reaction is to be skeptical of it. 11 targets, 26% target share. He had a utilization score of 95, which is pretty absurd. But to me, Keon Coleman looks like a guy who's going to be priced in the 6Ks on DraftKings for a lot of the year. And so to me, I don't mind trying to get ahead of it, even though it feels like you're chasing. It's not chasing if a $5,100 wide receiver is going to be 6K in the coming weeks. So those are kind of just a few examples of the spots I'm thinking about here. And we can get into some more of them as we draft some teams. But I think it's kind of best to just hop in these drafts. This will be my second Battle Royale draft. I will definitely aim to get all 150 in again this week. I am going to get some start-sit questions here. The Fantasy Life YouTube audience, of course, extends beyond just the world of DFS. I'll try to do my best. Adrian, would you trade J.K. Dobbins for Jordan Addison? In a vacuum, absolutely. Depends on your team needs. But yeah, Jordan Addison, I think, is going to be a significant fantasy contributor this year. And I think the Dobbins stuff, the fact that he's going to get squeezed in both directions by both RJ Harvey and this Tyler Bidet stuff, he's not an asset I'm super excited about. The whole thesis with him heading into the year was that he was going to get off to a fast start while Sean Payton eased RJ Harvey in. He is easing RJ Harvey in, but he's also using Tyler Bidet more than any of us ever anticipated. So I think if you can sell on Dobbins right now and get a premium asset, which I consider Jordan Addison, I think that's a good move. This is a good question too. What's the confidence level in Bill tonight for redraft? Wait and see another week. It's funny you say this. Actually, I'm on the clock here, so we'll do a little multitasking. I will take CMC 101 this week. Looks like Derrick Henry's ADP is slightly ahead of him right now. But yeah, we'll go with CMC and that insane workload. The confidence in Bill tonight for redraft, Will obviously mentioning one Mr. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. I have a decision in a redraft league whether I go Keon Coleman or Bill in my flex. I'm not going to lie, it's a pretty good team, which is why I'm having to decide with such a tough flex question. I think I'm going to go Keon Coleman. I'm excited about Bill. I think Bill is very good. I think he's going to continue to see his work increase. What I also think is that this Green Bay defense is extremely, extremely tough. And I'm a little worried about just the overall success for the Commanders offense tonight. And maybe that ends up looking silly in hindsight, but the Packers at home here versus this Commanders team a week after making Jahmyr Gibbs look extremely mortal. I mean, these were the rushing lines for the Lions last week against this Green Bay defense. David Montgomery, 11 carries for 25 yards, 2.3 yards per carry. Jahmyr Gibbs, 9 for 19, 2.1 yards per carry. So when you factor in the tough matchup, the fact that he is still going to lose touches or split touches, I should say, with an Austin Eckler, you're basically praying he rips off a 50 to 60 yard TD run. I think Bill has proven he's capable of that, but I think it's asking a lot of him tonight. But it would all go down to your options. Like, I think Keon Coleman is a really good option, and so that's why I'm leaning that route. I think Bill's days are coming. His weeks are coming. I do think Bill is going to be a league-winning type selection, depending on where you got him. I'm just not sure it happens tonight. Adrian says, which second-year wide receivers do you think will make the leap? Roma Dunze has buzz behind Caleb Williams in Chicago, but he got out produced by DJ Moore. I know I keep mentioning Keon Coleman, but I mean, some of these guys were the surprise ones. You look at where Marvin Harrison Jr. was priced. Everyone was already baking in a leap for him. Rome's price in, the 5th, 6th round of drafts left a little uncertainty there. I'm still, like you said, a little worried about that overall situation in Chicago. We're back on the clock here. Like I said, I am not scared of the Dolphins, so I'm going to take Devon Achane here. And now I can decide what I want to do. I think for this one, let's pull up Jalen Hurts here. His ADP slightly below guys like Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. But I do still think he represents the end of that elite quarterback tier. We see Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen go in the 2nd round, and so then we'll grab Jalen Hurts at the top of the 3rd. So this week, or at least in this first draft, we had, I took CMC 1, Barkley goes 2, Chase goes 3, Henry 4, Lamb 5, Trey McBride 6. No huge surprises there. I mean, McBride flipping the quarterbacks. I think you're going to see people kind of maybe mixing and matching whether they go elite tight end or the elite quarterbacks in round 1. But otherwise, this looks fairly normal to me here. But yeah, the Achane stuff, I feel pretty good. I mean, I think the Patriots' defensive line is a little bit better than their secondary. Genty didn't have a massive game there, but with Achane's role in the receiving game and what I think is still a spot where they can score a ton of points. I actually wrote about this in the newsletter too. The team total for the Dolphins would probably surprise you this year, or this week, I should say. They're 1.5 point favorites, and they're implied to score 22.5 points. That's the same as the Chiefs, the same as the Texans, the same as the Broncos, and the same as the Commanders tonight. So it's kind of just a reminder here not to overreact too much about the Dolphins' expectations, mainly because it is such a good matchup for them this week. Yeah, these are the kind of questions we should be cooking with here. We got my guy, Matt. What difference in strategy are there in Underdog DFS where you're drafting versus DFS on DraftKings or FanDuel where you have a budget? Yeah, so they're really different games. Obviously, drafting versus setting a team with the salary cap. The main difference is you have to react to what happens in a room, right? Your opponents can do things in a room that can affect what you do, right? If someone snipes your quarterback on a Jamar Chase stack, like you have to be able to react to that. Whereas in salary cap DFS, if you want to make a Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow lineup, knock yourself out. No one can prevent you from doing that. But there are a lot of parallels. And the best way to think about it is ADP on Underdog is the equivalent of salary on DraftKings, right? So if CMC is the 101 here, that would be the equivalent of like an $8,000, $8,500 price tag on DraftKings or whatever the highest salary is for that slate. And so you can think of that as kind of a sliding scale. But the ADP actually encompasses two things, right? It's both the price and the ownership, because the ownership in battle royale drafts is a little bit more binary in that 36 players are drafted in every contest. And after that, there is a really sliding scale of how often players are drafted. And that's why it's a pretty big part of my strategy to try to draft players who are not selected in 100% of contests. And so this is about the range of the draft board where I stopped caring about ADP and I am starting to care about ownership. I'm starting to care about very specific things. And you can see here in my ranks this week, I have James Conner pushed up very high. So I'm picking at 24 here. His ADP is 31.6. I'm going to go ahead and I can't select him because I've already maxed out on running backs, which is funny here. Let me go ahead and I'll grab my first wide receiver, T. Higgins. But we can use the Tyreek Hill as an example here. Let's do Tyreek Hill. So Tyreek Hill's ADP is 34.1. Historically, that ADP at 34.1 is going to translate to an ownership in this contest of less than 25%. So a play CMC, right? I took him 101. He's going to be drafted in 100% of these drafts. He will be on 1 out of every 6 rosters in the contest because he always goes. Someone like Tyreek Hill at an ADP of 34 means they're often going undrafted 3/4 of the time. So you can kind of understand, if you've played salary cap DFS, hitting on a player who the field isn't rostering or using is a huge, huge advantage, especially if that player puts up a tournament winning score. Last week, there was the example of Emeka Egbuka. And this was another interesting one when you kind of compare the differences between Underdog and DraftKings. So on DraftKings, Emeka Egbuka was incredibly popular because he had a low salary. He was in the 4Ks. He projected extremely well relative to his salary. So he was popular. I think he was like 30 to 35% ownership in most contests. But on battle royale drafts, he had an ADP down in the 34s, 35s, which meant, similar to Tyreek Hill's price this week, he wasn't getting drafted all that often. So Emeka Egbuka, he ended up hitting on both sites, right? You get the points regardless, but he was a much more valuable play on Underdog because not only did he hit, but a lot of rosters didn't have him. And so those are kind of the differences you should be thinking through as you're making these selections and being site specific where you get certain plays. What about chalk plays versus differentiating in these formats? Yeah, I'll make this last pick and then I will talk about this. So this is going to be my tight end selection. And you know what? This is the perfect springboard to talk about this as far as differentiating between two sites. So let's talk about the Browns running back or tight ends. Harold Fannin has that incredible week 1, leads the Browns in targets. David Njoku, of course, kind of taking a back seat with Fannin being used all over the formation. But I'm going to tell you why I'm going to take David Njoku here on Underdog over Harold Fannin. And I'm going to actually head over to my article just because I have it written up here and easy to display. These are the kind of the broad strokes about these two this week. And I think this is probably the best example to kind of understand the differences between Underdog and DraftKings and how you can leverage that. Harold Fannin Jr.'s ADP 34.8. He's the tight end 6 on Underdog. And he has a salary of $3,100 on DraftKings. David Njoku has an ADP of 35.5. He's the tight end 11 on Underdog, and he has a salary of $4,400 on DraftKings. So if we think about this, and I'm going to pull up my in my other sheet here, the historical ownership for these here. Harold Fannin is going to be drafted typically around 30+% of the time, probably even more, as the tight end 6. 6 tight ends are drafted in all of these contests. He's going to have an ownership probably around 50% would be my guess. David Njoku, though, as the tight end 11, is going to have an ownership that's sub 15%. So that's a pretty big gap between these two. And on DraftKings, it's flipped. On DraftKings, Njoku is the more expensive option, $4,400, and Fannin is only $3,100. And so what is going to happen here is if you look at all of these elements, Harold Fannin Jr., he will be popular on DraftKings, but he is going to be a really, really good play. It is just hard on DraftKings to get tight ends that have upside who can command as many targets as Fannin did at 3,100. But that is going to track ownership-wise on Underdog. David Njoku, however, at 4,400, that's a really tough click on DraftKings, especially because it's full point PPR. He's not seeing as many targets. The play with David Njoku is really that he scores a touchdown. That's going to play a lot better on Underdog, where it's half point PPR, and his ownership is going to be significantly lower. So this is a rare case where you get almost a 1-for-1 pivot. It's a teammate pivot at the same position, but you're getting a discount. And while I love Fannin Jr., I do think he's going to be someone who defines the season this year in redraft. I think he's going to have plenty of big games. These are the situations I like to exploit on Underdog because ultimately, outside of the Brock Bowers, the Trey McBrides, and the George Kittles, rest in peace while he's on IR, you're essentially touchdown hunting when you pick a tight end. The floor is so low for these guys. And at that point, if you're just touchdown hunting, then I want to play the ownership game here. And what that generally means is that I'm avoiding a lot of the tight ends who aren't elite, but carry higher ownership. And so on this slate, Trey McBride at the top definitely deserves to be the top dog. But when you're looking at Kelsey, Warren, Laporta, Andrews, and Fannin, you're now talking about guys who are going to both be popular and who have a lower floor. So if you hear me talking about scrolling or getting unique, I'm going to be talking a lot about the tight ends in the 7 to 12 range. Because if I had to summarize it as simply as possible, it's that guys like Hunter Henry, Dalton Kincaid, Juwan Johnson, Strange, Njoku, Goddard, Ferguson, they just don't project that much differently than the earlier tight ends, Travis Kelce, Tyler Warren, Sam Laporta, Andrews, and Fannin. So if I tell you, you can get a very similar projection, a very similar chance at a touchdown at a fraction of the ownership, that's a no-brainer decision, right? And so these are the kind of situations we want to exploit specifically in these battle royale drafts because the field is naturally so anchored to ADP. It's really hard for us to fathom that the tight end 11 could be a better play than the tight end 3. But the way these contests work, it's a fact. And it's something that I think we can exploit as drafters. So let's recap this team real quickly here. I took Jalen Hurts at quarterback, Christian McCaffrey, Devon Achane, T. Higgins, Tyreek Hill, David Njoku. So naked Jalen Hurts, I do not need to force a stack with Jalen Hurts. I think it's fine if you want to sprinkle in teams with Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert. But the selling point for Jalen Hurts is the selling point of what Justin Fields did last week, of what Daniel Jones did last week, that they get it done on the ground. And what ends up actually happening, and we did the data on this for our Underdog Masterclass that I put out with the Badge Bros, but the field tends to overstack these rushing quarterbacks because we all come over from best ball and we all have best ball brain or even DraftKings brain, right? Where stacking is way more mandatory when you have 9 slots in your lineup, and when we're drafting best ball teams, you have 18. And so that carries over and we naturally want to stack. It feels good. It feels comfy. But what often happens is it limits your overall ceiling in these contests where you're actually aiming for perfection. And what you really want when you select Jalen Hurts is that he has the 50 yards rushing, the 2 rushing TD game, and he is in the optimal lineup. He's the quarterback you want because of that rushing. So there obviously are going to be scenarios where the stacking hits and A.J. Brown has that 2 touchdown game, etc. But it's really the rushing component that make these guys so attractive. And because of that, stacking is less of an imperative, especially if the field is stacking at too high of a rate. And that's generally what the data has borne out. One thing I did in this lineup that I will do occasionally, but not force, is I will have 2 teammates without the quarterback. And typically if I do this, I want it to be in a couple of different contexts. One, I want it to be a really condensed offense, right? I don't want to pick 2 teammates on a team where it's really spread out, like the Broncos, right? Like that would be an example of a team where, they're using 3 different running backs. They're using 5 different wide receivers. No. I want to do it where we know all of the touches are going through just a couple of guys. On top of it, I like doing it when their quarterback doesn't have that high of a ceiling. So I did it here with Achane and Tyreek Hill. We know Tua, he's not going to run the ball a ton, doesn't have a massive individual ceiling. So there's certainly scenarios where Achane gets it done on the ground, Tyreek Hill consolidates as the number 1, and Jalen Hurts outscores Tua. That's kind of the thesis. Another team you could do it with would be the Rams, right? You play Kyren Williams and you play one of Puka or Devontae Adams. You don't need to use Matthew Stafford because he has a lower ceiling, and you still get that block of points while still getting a higher ceiling at the quarterback position. So those were a few things on lineup construction. And then because I didn't get Trey McBride, and I had the decision there at tight end at the end, it was easy for me to go David Njoku over Harold Fannin because of that kind of ownership discrepancy that we talked about. All right, let me catch in on the chat. Cooterdoodle trolling me about Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. Let's say week 2. When Ja'Cory, who do the Commanders play in week 2? Oh yeah, Commanders at home versus the Raiders next week. That's going to be the Bill breakout party for real. I love that you asked this, Nathan. Is Mac Jones stack a bit much for BR? Like Jones, CMC plus Jones, Ricky? Yeah, this is a really good question because I actually think Mac Jones is a very viable play on DraftKings this week. He's only 4K. So I wrote him up in my article as the vomit stack of the week, Mac Jones in the Niners. So Mac Jones only costs 4K. If you're not familiar, the reason this happened is because the salaries came out before it was announced that Brock Purdy was going to miss the game with his turf toe. So those salaries are essentially stale. It's a glitch. If they could redo the pricing right now, they'd make Mac Jones 5,300, 5,400 or whatever. CMC's only 7,500. Ricky Pearsall's 5,300. So that makes him, as a points per dollar play, probably one of the best quarterback values on DraftKings. So very much in play there. But here's the thing. We head over to Underdog and we look at the available quarterback pool. And you have the top 6 guys who are all going to be fairly popular: Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Justin Fields, Kyler Murray. But then you can go down here and you can get guys like Dak Prescott, Patrick Mahomes, Drake May, Jared Goff, Trevor Lawrence, Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, like those names, even Daniel Jones coming off of a monster game, Tua, who I just said had a good setup. And all of those guys are going to come with a fraction of the ownership, right? Those are going to be 5% guys, especially the ones way down here: Caleb, Bo Nix, Daniel Jones, Tua. So to me, getting to a guy like Mac Jones is just a little too thin because you can get the same thing that you're hunting for, right? Which is kind of the galaxy brain, low owned quarterback without sacrificing as much projection, because Mac Jones isn't going to project that well, especially because he's depleted as far as his weaponry. So to me, it would be too fancy on Underdog. I just don't think you need to get there. I think I would rather live in this range with the Drake Mays, the Bo Nix, the Daniel Joneses, stack up Tua, stack up Caleb Williams, stack up Trevor Lawrence, and you can basically accomplish the same thing with a better play. A-Rod says he loves Hunter Henry this week. Yes, I think he's a very solid play for sure. I think going back to the Patriots and the fact, one of the things I love is when you can get a stack where they're both low owned, is really, really nice. So Hunter Henry, ADP of 35, Drake May, 35.2. So you basically get the double whammy of the benefits. And this is exactly what happened last week with Daniel Jones and Michael Pittman Jr. And let me show you this here. Matt says here, do you have any resource that translates ADP to ownership easily? So I actually do in the Underdog Masterclass I have, but I'm going to show you how you can basically get a really good feel for it just by looking at the previous slates on Underdog. So even if you don't want to play a lot of volume, I'd recommend just putting one entry into one of the contests, because this year, for the first time ever, Underdog is showing the ownership in the contest itself. So I'll pull up the winning lineup from last week. This was Spike 9771. He won $50,000 with a Daniel Jones to Michael Pittman stack. And you can see here, Underdog now has the ownership percentages. So this lineup also had Bijan Robinson, 100% drafted. Daniel Jones, 6.07% drafted. Michael Pittman Jr., 1.35% drafted. And what you can do then is you can expand this, see what their ADP was. So Daniel Jones had an ADP of 35.8. That resulted in an ownership of 6.07%. Michael Pittman Jr. had an ownership of 35.9. That resulted in an ownership of 1.35%. So this was like a supercharged strategy in the fact that you got a quarterback and a pass catcher that were both low owned. The field just did not have these guys a lot, much less together. And so when A-Rod mentions Hunter Henry, that's another one, the idea of pairing Drake May, Hunter Henry. So when you're right, not only are you right across two plays, but they're also really unique. Opinion on playing Kendrick Bourne this week as a scroll down. Again, to me, I think that's a little too fancy. One of the things that I've learned over the years is you can still get plays who project very well, who forecast to receive a lot of targets without having to go that far down. So as an example, like we look at Kendrick Bourne, right? He's going to have a non-existent ADP. He's going to be, he's not even in the playing pool. I don't think they put him in the player pool. So sorry to burst your bubble on that. I believe he should be in the DraftKings player pool. I think I actually got an email that they added him. DraftKings will sometimes add them after the fact if possible. Whereas Underdog, once it's released, then it's final. But in general, I would still say if he was in the player pool, that'd be too thin, because look at this. You can draft Devontae Adams, ADP of 35.4, one of the greatest wide receivers to ever play in the game, who is still going to command a good chunk of targets. You can get him at sub 20% ownership. You can play DJ Moore. You can play Jamison Williams. You can play Travis Hunter coming off of a game with 8 targets. Calvin Ridley, who I wrote up in my article, coming off of a game with 8 targets. So you just don't have to galaxy brain it in Underdog as much as you do elsewhere. You can essentially have your cake and eat it too. Get highly projected players that also don't, that also project well and don't have a high ownership. Yeah, so favorite scroll down clicks. We've hit on a couple of them already so far. I love the Drake May and the Hunter Henry shout. One I wrote up in the article are the Titans. You know, this is one of those spots where I really want to fade recency bias. And I'm realizing now this is a DFS jam and I've only drafted one team, but I feel like we're having some good conversation. So I'm just letting it roll. But the field doesn't want to touch the Titans because they just put up a stinker. But when we look at that matchup, going on the road to Denver, one of the best defenses in football, Cam Ward's first career start, of course it wasn't going to be pretty. Now they're back at home versus the Rams. Now I don't think the Rams are a particularly easy matchup, but when I look at the volume, Tony Pollard coming off of 18 touches, he had an 89% snap share. There is no competition for touches in this backfield until Tajay Spears returns. Calvin Ridley coming off an 8-target game, and they had a tough matchup. Like, it is what it is. And this is the kind of spot where I'm willing to buy the dip on these guys. And this would be another example where I talked about a highly condensed offense where I would be okay doing a running back wide receiver pairing. I would be fine playing Tony Pollard and Calvin Ridley. The other one, Tyreek Hill with an ADP of 34.1. He looks awesome. George Pickens at 34.2. I think this Cowboys offense is going to explode. They had some near misses. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb dropped a couple of high-profile catches in that Thursday night opener. Hollywood Brown is another really good one to think through as far as the differences between DraftKings and Underdog. So one little cheat code, and this was the Emeka Egbuka cheat code in week 1, is you look at who is the most popular chalky player on DraftKings. Last week it was Emeka Egbuka, 30%. Hollywood Brown, guys, is going to be like 40% this week in contest because he is coming off of a game with, 16 targets, 10 receptions, and a 40% target share. He's only 5,200 on DraftKings. He is going to be incredibly popular. But we head over here to Underdog. He has an ADP of 34.9. 34.9. He's the wide receiver 19. He's going to be drafted less than a fifth of the time, probably sub 20% ownership. Hollywood Brown is an awesome click this week on Underdog specifically. So that's another one where it's kind of a mind fuck in that you play, he's going to be a chalky piece over on DraftKings. I don't like him as much over there, but then on Underdog, you can get it at a pretty good discount, relatively speaking. JTB has a friends and family question. Hurts, Fields, and Herbert give me a headache on who to start. Yeah, you got to just keep rolling Hurts, and I would try to trade one of those if possible. Unreleased lo-fi music. Opinion on captaining Bill in 150 of 150 showdowns tonight. That would be a grade A slappy move. I would not recommend that personally, but it does sound like fun. I am terrified of that Green Bay defense, though. All right, let's draft another team here. See if we can get a different draft slot. So I'm drafting in the big battle royale. This one has 40K to first. There are lots of different contests up on Underdog. I do like focusing on this one because it has the biggest prize pool, the biggest first place prize, $7 entry, 40K to first. But if you have a smaller bankroll or you're trying to realize your edge quicker, playing in the smaller contests would be a prudent idea. So even here, like this $3.20 max, the hurry up, is a really good beginner contest. Obviously, only costs $3 to enter. There's only 7,500 entrants in this compared to 48,200 entrants. And obviously, the prizes aren't going to be as big. First place is 2,000 instead of 40,000, but you're competing against far less rosters. So if you guys are new to Underdog, I would recommend dabbling in some of these smaller contests. And then as you build your bankroll, you can start to kind of shoot for the larger prizes. But the truth is, in these larger contests like the main battle royale, it's going to be more losing weeks than winning weeks. And so focusing on the smaller contests, I think is prudent when you're first starting out and building up your bankroll. If you guys are just tuning in, this is going to be a new weekly show here on the Fantasy Life YouTube channel. I'm Peter Overzet. I stream a lot of shows over on my YouTube channel. I do a bunch of DFS shows on Fridays. I'm going to be doing a show later this afternoon called the Battle Royale Bash, where various YouTube members can hop on and draft teams with me. So I'm basically thinking, breathing, sleeping, DFS, Battle Royales, nonstop, and excited to be doing this show every Thursday on Fantasy Life. And like I said, I'll be mixing it up a little bit. I'll bring some guests on. I think I'm going to bust out my randomizer wheel, but getting in the groove here in week 1. I'm just a DFS bro. All of your rankings questions you must direct to Waz. Although I'm doing your job for you today here, Waz. People asking me start sits like JTB. We have more questions here. Bucky Irving or Dobbins? Come on, Metrius. This isn't even close. This isn't even close. Go read the utilization report. Bucky's week 1 usage was awesome. He's set up for a monster year based on the usage. The Rachaad White third down stuff looks like it is going to be a thing of the past. Bucky's a smash. May or Penix is closer. I think I slightly lean May. But that one's closer. Thank you, Unreleased Lo-Fi, for the kind words about the YouTube stream I got to do last Thursday and Friday. I'm back on the clock, and I have the 101 again. They call it the Influencer 101. I did CMC last time. Let's do Derrick Henry this time. We'll mix it up just to get a slightly different team here on camera. All right. You guys asking me questions, trying to put me to the spot. What if I just use our rankings team at Fantasy Life to answer these questions for me? What if I just go over to the flex? What if I pick a team, the Green Bay Packers, and we see what they say? So we have Tucker Kraft edging out Romeo Doubs by a pretty good bit. We have him as a consensus 112 in our flex rankings, and we have Romeo Doubs at 139. I think the kind of my enthusiasm for Romeo Doubs was centered around Jayden Reed potentially being a non-factor, and then he had a much bigger role in week 1 than I expected. That truly surprised me. There was all the talk about the Jones fracture. I don't think he has a Jones fracture because guys don't play through Jones fractures in the way he did and have success like that. So the Romeo Doubs stuff, he's going to be on the field a ton for them, obviously, but it is not as much of a slam dunk now that Reed's okay. And you can see here, I just did a utilization report comparison. I'm going to make my picks here, and then we'll go back at looking at that. It's one of my favorite tools over on Fantasy Life. So look at this. Josh Allen comes back to me at pick 12. This is awesome. Anytime I can get a faller in the top 12 to 13 players, someone that's an elite player, I take it every single time. I will never pass up on a faller like this. So getting Josh Allen at 12 to pair with Derrick Henry, and then I can make my other pick here. We can do Brian Thomas from Malik Neighbors. Let's go ahead and do Brian Thomas. We'll do Brian Thomas. I am like a little worried about Brian Thomas just in that Travis Hunter is going to be such a target hog when he's out on the field. I think Brian Thomas the ceiling is still very much intact for Brian Thomas, but I do worry about the floor a little bit. I mean, he was getting spammed targets last year with Mac Jones, seeing 11, 12, 13 plus targets a game down the stretch. I just worry if that is going to be the norm going forward with Hunter there. So his price does give me a little pause, but again, I'm playing in a contest where I'm trying to get first place. He still has that ceiling. But anyways, back to this utilization thing here. You see he had a better utilization score than Doubs by a pretty good amount. 91% of the snaps to 70% of the snaps for Doubs. 78% of the routes to 74. Similar targets per route run, similar target percentage. But the underlying utilization, including the end zone targets, 50% of the end zone targets there, just a nod in favor of Tucker Kraft. Highly recommend, if you guys don't have Fantasy Life Plus, there's a QR code down there. You can check it out. You can use promo code Pete to get that 20% off. You get access to this full utilization suite, all the projections, the rankings, the league sync, best ball hub, So much good stuff there. Take advantage of this. Like all of these, you guys ask me start sit questions or stuff like this. This is everything I use for my research throughout the week. Trying to figure out my own start sits, trying to look at DFS situations. Can't recommend it enough. So we have a Josh Allen, Derrick Henry, Brian Thomas team. Again, for people who are new on Underdog, you can go up to 3 wide receivers or 2 running backs. The data, at least from last year, is extremely clear that the majority of the time you should be drafting 2 running back teams. A little over 88%, I think it was close to 90% of both winning teams and teams in the top 0.1% of contests across all of last year. And we did the data study on this for our Underdog Masterclass, had 2 running back teams. And it makes sense, right? Running backs are just easier to project. That projectable volume is easier for us to pin down. And on a site like Underdog, where it's half-point PPR scoring, that's valuable. So here's the spot that I was looking to do last week, last draft, but I had already taken CMC and Achane. I'm going to go ahead and grab James Conner here. I have him ranked 16th in my rankings right now. His ADP is 31. I love this matchup at home versus Carolina. So I will grab him, and now I'll be looking at a wide receiver and a tight end. Let's do Hollywood Brown. We're going to go double kind of scroll down plays here. Hollywood Brown, like I said, ADP of 34.9, coming off a massive target game, going to serve as the Chiefs wide receiver 1 in a game with a good total. I think it has a 47.5 point total. And one reason I really like setting my ranks and moving players up and down the scrolls that I want to get to is because it helps remove the anchoring bias to ADP. Because otherwise, this idea of like, man, I'm scrolling past Ricky Pearsall, I'm scrolling past DK Metcalf, I'm scrolling past all these guys to select Hollywood Brown. That's a hard psychological hurdle to get past. And it's the reason there's such an edge in these games, because the field has a hard time scrolling. And so if you can set your ranks, if you can push players up that you think are undervalued relative to their ADP and just put it on a billboard in front of you, hey, draft these guys, draft these guys. They don't project that much differently than these other guys. You know, like it's a good example putting Hollywood Brown versus JSN. Both teams operating as their wide receiver 1, going to see a ton of targets, but not great situations. Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to be drafted close to 100% of the time. Hollywood Brown isn't. Makes it an easy decision to tilt your exposures in the direction of the player with the lower ADP. Yeah, I agree. Hard not to overreact to the BTJ volume. It's definitely going to be a different setup than last year. Curious, what is the most optimal roster format along with 2 running backs? Well, there's not a lot of other decisions, right? You never want to flex 2 tight ends. That's a real losing strategy. And so 2 running backs is the dominant construction. And so from there, the other decision points are really how much do you stack? And how much do you force bringbacks from a game? And in general, I don't want to be forcing bringbacks. I don't want to be overstacking because it really does limit my downside. So with Josh Allen here, though, this is a spot where I can consider going with Dalton Kincaid. I don't need to force it. And if Dalton Kincaid had a higher ADP and was regularly getting drafted, then I would maybe shy away from it. But this is actually a spot where I don't mind it. You know, I look at these ADPs. Laporta is going to be on nearly 100% of teams. I'd rather scroll down a little bit here. And so if I'm able to scroll and get to a logical stack partner, then that kind of lines up for me. So I am going to go ahead and stack Josh Allen. Now, I will say this, though. I'm going to draft 150 of these. I'm going to probably have somewhere between 10 to 20 Josh Allen teams across my week 2 portfolio. A lot of those, probably half of them, won't be stacked. I will probably have 10 to 12 naked Josh Allen teams. The other 10 to 12 will have Dalton Kincaid, Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakur. So when you're drafting a lot of teams, I do think it's important to be mindful of your stacking rates, and you don't want to get overconfident in one single angle. Always stacking Josh Allen would be bad, as would always playing him naked would probably limit your upside to some of those, high ceiling scenarios. And I think their game against the Ravens was a good example of this, right? If we look at the score here, so Josh Allen put up 38 points, and this wasn't on the main slate, right? They played Sunday Night Football, so this wasn't in the typical battle royale, but we can still look at how this would have functioned. Let's assume they were on the main slate. Josh Allen scoring 38 points would have been the highest scoring quarterback on the main slate. He would have outscored Daniel Jones, Justin Fields, etc. And then let's go look at what Keon Coleman did. Keon Coleman scored 21.2 points. He was outscored slightly by like an Emeka Egbuka. He's not on this slate. A Michael Pittman. Let's see here. Michael Pittman only scored 17. So in that situation, the Keon Coleman stacked up with Josh Allen, you would have been able to win a tournament with that stack. Now there's other stacks like Kincaid last week, right? Where he only scored 12.8. I actually think he still probably could have won a tournament on the main slate with Allen to Kincaid because it was such a low scoring tournament. Let me see if I can find a better example. Shakir. So Shakir only scores 9.4 points. If you had stacked Josh Allen with Shakir and they were on the week 1 main slate, you would not have been able to win any tournaments because there were wide receivers scoring between 20 to 25 points. So that's just like an example of the various kind of ranges of outcomes when you stack. The hope is that when you stack, you land on a really concentrated performer where they score the majority of the points for that team. And Emeka Egbuka was a good example last week, right? He had the 2 touchdowns. Mike Evans didn't have the touchdowns. That ended up being a really good leverage play off of Mike Evans because Mike Evans was drafted in 100% of the contest. Emeka Egbuka wasn't. And then you got the concentrated scoring. And so that stack could have worked out. So that's what I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about stacking, especially these high-end guys. It's definitely more of an art than a science, and definitely more based on your overall portfolio and how you want to construct it. But I think my main kind of takeaway there is don't get locked in to being too hyper specific on how you want to utilize these quarterbacks. I think having a balanced approach with both some stacking and some not stacking is the way to go. Let's do a smaller contest here because I want to show you guys how I like to calibrate some of my strategies in a smaller contest where there's less entries. So let's see here. Who wants to hop in and engage 8 with me? This is a $5 entry, 4,500 entrants, 2K to first. And this is a type of contest where I'm going to be more willing to double stack, more willing to lean into a game environment because I don't need perfection like I do in a contest with 48,000 entries. Thank you again to everybody hanging out on this first ever Fantasy Life DFS Jam. When the show's over, let me know any feedback in the comments. Obviously, I'm just rolling solo. If there's things you'd like me to do, I can certainly steer this show in lots of directions. We can do guests. We can do the wheel, forcing me to draft some weirder teams. We could build a lineup on DraftKings. We can do a lot and use it as a vehicle to talking about the DFS slate for the upcoming week. I'm open to suggestions. Like so many things I do, I just start and we figure it out as we go. We need one more person for this Engage 8 draft here. You can see the payout structure. 2K to first, 1,500 to second, top 10, $200 there. Only 4,500 entrants. And we got the 105 this time, so we'll get to do a little bit of a different build. We got a friends and family draft. Oh, yeah. Wow. Even Chipsy in here. Even Chipsy. So let's see here. Now I'm going to be drafting from a different portion of the board after my 101 and 102. immediately one thing my mind goes to is I wouldn't mind doing a CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, Dak Prescott double stack. That would be fun. I'm not going out of my way to force double stacks, even in the smaller tournaments, but it is something that I will break ties in favor of. Just knowing, hey, last week we had a really low scoring slate. There were not very many games that popped off. There's a good chance week 2 is relatively low scoring again. And if you identify that one game that does go nuts, again, last week it would have been Bills Ravens if that was on the main slate. If you would have just stacked up that game every which way, you would have been cooking. Let's go ahead and do it. Yeah, let's grab CeeDee Lamb here and see if I can have some fun with that. So then Barkley goes, Josh Allen goes, which I was debating between CeeDee and Gibbs. And so the fact that I could get both of them here seems nice. So we'll start with Gibbs and CeeDee Lamb. One other thing I would like to mention for these Battle Royale drafts is even though you're reacting to what your opponents do, even though weird stuff can happen and there can be ADP fallers and you can get sniped, for the most part, you can kind of sketch out what you want to do even before you enter the draft. So I just mentioned, hey, I'd like to do a Dallas double stack. Obviously, that requires getting CeeDee Lamb. But from there, you can go and kind of pre-plan it. And you shouldn't hesitate to scroll and select these guys maybe ahead of their ADP just to lock it up. Because the opportunity cost just isn't that big. You can see here in my personal rankings after Neighbors and Thomas are off the board, I'm already down to James Conner and Tyreek Hill. Like I'm already down that far. So in these situations, I have no problem going and just locking up my stack. One, because I get the exposure I want. And two, because it will also force me to get maybe some deeper scrolls at other positions. So let's go ahead and just do that right now. I'm just going to grab Pickens. I don't see anyone on the board that I have to have. Neighbors is kind of interesting if I wanted to go full game stack for this, which I could. I don't love going three wide receiver teams, especially in these smaller contests, and in our cave takes Neighbors anyway, so I won't have to worry about that. But this is definitely a slate, right, with there only being the 3 elite quarterbacks and the 1 elite tight end. It's going to lead to more scrolling from me than normal, where otherwise, if there's multiple elite tight ends, if there's multiple elite quarterbacks, I'm generally trying to scoop those guys up in the second and third round as much as possible. But I'll go ahead and just take Dak here, just to make sure no one gets too crazy out of pocket. And I've lined up my Dak double stack to CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. We got Jahmyr Gibbs here at running back. And so now I'll be looking at a running back and a tight end to shut this down. What's the term? Crutches says Chip bum hunting. What's the term if you're the one that makes it bum hunting? I think Chipsy's the one getting hunted. We need a new term for that. Thoughts on Jawan Johnson and bro Kittle though is going to miss 4 games. I am aware, sir. I am aware. It is a huge bummer because he otherwise would have been one of those elite tight ends on this slate. I think Jawan Johnson's a good scroll at tight end. I mean, he's coming off of a massive 11 target game. I don't think it's like a smash play on Underdog. Again, the half point PPR, you're mainly hunting for touchdowns, and the selling point for him is really those catches that are going to be more valuable on DraftKings. But yeah, I mean, he's going to have a lower draft percentage than a lot of these guys. All right, I'm going to do another James Conner. Like James Conner just stands out to me in a big way right now on this slate. 31.6 ADP, home versus Carolina. And now we need to pick a tight end. I'm going to show you something else that I'll do. And I mentioned this in my Underdog Masterclass. Some of these times, and I know this might not seem fun to you guys, but I will do a random number generator to tell me which tight end to select. 1 through 6, whatever number comes up is the one I'm taking. 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hunter Henry. Boom, bam, boom. I do that more in the large field BRs, but a lot of times when it's super flat and I don't want to let my just kind of biases seep in and I'm just clicking the same guy over and over again, I will let the randomization gods take over for me. So here's this team in the Engage 8. Dak Prescott, double stack to CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. Jahmyr Gibbs and James Conner. Hunter Henry at tight end. Like I said earlier, I am at, what time is it going to be at? 3? Is it 3 or 3:30? 3 or 3:30 today. I'm doing the Battle Royale Bash on my channel. Let me double check. 3:30. 3:30. And I'll be drafting more Battle Royale teams, but it will be with people from the chat. If you're a YouTube member on the Peter Overzet YouTube channel, I will spin the wheel and we can draft some Dog Bowl teams. We can draft some Battle Royale teams. It's going to be BR Thursdays here for Pete. Let's see. Should we have just a little bit of time left? You guys want to do a Thursday night football, Sunday night football primetime palooza? So these are 4-person drafts that just span 2 games. So you have 4 teams. I'm going to learn right now what the Sunday night football matchup is. All right. It's Atlanta and Minnesota. These require an almost completely different strategy than the other BRs. But because we have a game tonight, I thought it'd be fun to hop in and do one of these. Brady checking out our eliminator pods. Does it mean I'm a good drafter if we share 4 players in our eliminator matchup? I told you not to dupe me, Brady. I told you not to dupe me. Who are the players? Who are the players we share? All right. We got the 1-3. So one thing about these, right, is there's only 4 starting quarterbacks. Which to me, when I look at these ADPs, it's kind of Jaden Daniels or bust. So if you get Jaden Daniels, great. If not, you can just wait until your last pick to get Jordan Love, McCarthy, or Penix. I guess you could try to sell me on Love being a significantly better play than Love or McCarthy, McCarthy or Penix, but I don't know if I'd buy it. If we look at tight ends, the tight end slate isn't bad. Pitts, Hawkinson, Kraft, Ertz. That's also really flat to me. So what that means is I want to be focusing on the running backs and wide receivers here. Justin Jefferson, a pretty clear pick for me at 1-3. And this is just me doing my very quick bro science VORP, value over replacement here, eyeballing this slate. This is another, the primetime paloozas where I do kind of like to lean into team level correlations. The most likely thing is that one of these 4 teams has more success than the others. And so just getting a couple players from that same team. Man, Nick at night really burning down the clock here. He goes, Bill, I think what will I do here? Debo did look pretty good. I'm debating if I wanted to grab my running back here. Running back does get so gross that I think I will prioritize Aaron Jones. I'll just go in on the Vikings here at home versus Atlanta. Yes, I'm skipping London and Samuel, which doesn't feel good. But what won't feel good is moving down into the Eckler, Algier, Wilson range at running back. So I'm going to prioritize my running back here first, knowing that I don't mind some of these other wide receivers. You know, Matthew Golden, like if I do the 2v2, right? What 2v2 do you like better? Drake London and Austin Eckler, or Aaron Jones and Jaden Reed or Matthew Golden? To me, I like the latter. So we'll grab Reed here. The most inconsequential Jones fracture we've ever seen. And I'm just going to keep sitting on quarterback. Let's see. So we could I want to go tight end here. The risk is that I lose out on both Love and McCarthy with no Falcons, which would be kind of silly. But I think we go Kraft here. And then we have outs to either McCarthy or Love as our quarterback. And we just have to hope that Esmeranda or GP in GC doesn't snake our quarterbacks. And that's exactly what happened. Oh, man. Okay, so Penix is going to be our quarterback, but we don't have to take him here. Darnell Mooney remains limited in practice. Ray McLeod was busy in the season opener. So this is what you do. You take Darnell Mooney because if he doesn't play, I can swap to Ray McLeod or Matthew Golden. I don't take my quarterback there because the drafter behind me has already selected their quarterback. So I know I'm going to get Penix. He's the last quarterback taken. But that was pretty brutal. This drafter, Esmeranda, who I believe is auto drafting, they took JJ McCarthy, I guess, with Mason and Hawkinson instead of Penix with London. It is what it is. That's what happens in these. But it was funny that I thought I had two outs at quarterback and they both slipped through my hands. Again, if you guys are new to Underdog, you don't need to be scared of the Q tags, especially Q tags later in the draft, because the opportunity cost, it's like no one's taking Ray McLeod regardless, right? So if I am not able to play Darnell Mooney and Darnell Mooney is a scratch, I'm going to be able to swap. The system will automatically swap to the next best available player. And then I can go and set my swap ranking. So for this slate, I obviously haven't set rankings for this, but if I go in here and do it, I can put Ray McLeod at the top, save this. And that way, if Darnell Mooney doesn't go on Sunday night, the system, assuming Ray McLeod doesn't get drafted in this one. Let's go make sure he didn't get drafted. So this point actually stands. Oh, and then I lost the board because I closed it out. But assuming Darnell Mooney didn't get drafted, then I will be able to swap to Ray McLeod. So it's worth taking on that risk. And you can see here, the first draft I did on Monday, I took Kittle. Kittle had the Q tag. Pretty decent chance he was going to be out, but it doesn't matter, right? Because I'm going to swap. I can swap to David Njoku. I can swap to Hunter Henry. I can swap to Dalton Kincaid. I can swap to Dallas Goedert. So I always like taking players who I think are superstars or studs like George Kittle. If they play, great. I got a discount on him. I got him at pick 23, where he would normally never go if he was fully healthy. So don't be scared of those Q tags. All right. One final question here before we get out. I have Pickens and I want to trade up for AJ Brown. What would be a fair trade? First of all, I would wait. I would wait for the Pickens blow up game. But honestly, I think you could just offer that straight up right now. I mean, people are spooked about AJ Brown. I wouldn't be giving that much up extra with Pickens to get AJ Brown. I still do prefer AJ Brown straight up. He's going to be fine, but the inconsistency is going to be there. You shouldn't have to give up a ton extra with Pickens. And I think if you wait, like Pickens is going to have that blow up game. Pickens is going to go for 2 touchdowns, maybe as early as this week. I would wait till after this week because people aren't going to value Pickens appropriately until they see it on the field. That'd be my 2 cents. All right, guys, this was a blast. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the Fantasy Life channel. Use promo code Pete to get that Fantasy Life Plus, all of those utilization tools, leak sync, projections, rankings, so much good stuff included in that. It comes out to legitimately like $7 a month when you get the 20% off with promo code Pete on Fantasy Life Plus. I will be back every Thursday afternoon at noon Eastern to do this show. If you guys have any suggestions, comments, please leave those down below after the show. And be sure to check out my full DFS column as well up on Fantasy Life. I'll drop it in the chat here again. All of my thoughts on strategy for week 2 on both Underdog and DraftKings. Thanks again to everyone who tuned in. Thanks to producer Matt Swing for getting us all set up here with these graphics. Looking forward to doing this. Good luck in week 2, and I'll see you guys on the other shows this weekend.